Welcome into the podcast. Today is the 29th of July, 2017. I just want to start out, man. It's kind of an interesting thing to me that people assign themselves importance in your life. And that's kind of based on how we see them, how we treat them. We help to formulate how we see ourselves in someone's lives, or how they see themselves in our life. But sometimes there's this false sense of arrogance and opinionated feeling that they're more important than they actually are. And it's weird because I've had to cut people out of my life in the past 2 days. Whereas maybe a couple years ago, I would have been I'll let it slide. I can let people cool off, let people weather the storm, whatever. But I look back on all the times that I did that, and it really didn't help anything. It wasn't like it got better after that. It's kind of like that Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink. And I just the most basic summary ever. Just the idea that your first instinct is usually right. I believe that. I often second guess myself, and then I realize that I was right the first time. And so with these people, it was look, I'm not going to be treated or talked to the way that they want to talk to me. I'm not going to deal with that. It doesn't help me as a person to put up with that. It doesn't make our relationship as friends any better. It doesn't make me want to get to know them any better. It doesn't inspire much confidence in me that person is worth knowing. The older I get, the more I realize this idea of friends that you see on TV shows and in movies, and that's great and all, but I don't really entirely believe that that's a realistic expectation. I've been thinking about my future plans as far as housing, and if I'm going to purchase after my lease is up, if I need to start looking as far as, am I going to buy something, or am I going to go back to renting, whether that's downsizing or what. And I've come to realize it's just expensive to live. After bills and everything, it's I don't make enough money to even entertain the idea of buying something. And I thought about it. I'm maybe I can get a roommate. And that's what a lot of people have said. They're just get a roommate. And I've thought to myself, and I'm honestly, I don't really have anybody in my life that I would want as a roommate. It's nothing against the people who are in my life, but just overall, how they, my relationship with everybody that I have in my life really isn't to a point where I would want them to be that much in my space. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not that they're not good people, not that there's not a lot of good opportunities, but I really don't feel like that's something that I would want to do or be comfortable doing. I had college roommates, and I wasn't really a fan of it, to be honest with you. I was a roommate with one of my good friends, but in that whole time, 9 months that we lived together, I saw him maybe 10 times total in 9 months. And we lived together. Okay, that's just kind of how it was with his work schedule and his girlfriend that he had at the time. Never saw him. And so to me, I was like living by myself, essentially. And after that, after I moved out of that place, I moved into an apartment, and I did it on my own. And I preferred that. And then eventually I was in a relationship, and she lived with me, but that wasn't like a roommate relationship. It was we're a couple, and so it wasn't weird, Initially it was weird because I'd never, lived with somebody like that. But the more I think about it, I'm like, what is that a bad thing? These relationships that I have, these friendships that I have aren't to the point where I would want to live with them. You see all these shows and it's like, wow, they have some really solid friends. They have this solid group of friends they can rely on, they can count on. And at one point I think I had that. Been through a lot of ups and downs as far as friendships go. Part of that was I was just kind of an asshole. But a lot of it was not just that. There was a lot more that went into it, and I kind of have held negative feelings for a while about it, and I can't do that. Honestly, I needed to let those go, and so I've just kind of accepted. It's like, look, you're going to introduce people to your friends, and they're going to become friends. They're going to become better friends with your friends than you are. So, you can't, what are you going to do, fault them for that? Be like, oh no, you can't be as good a friend with them as I am because I introduced you guys. That's petty and stupid and, ridiculous. The only problem I guess I have with it is when there's like no acknowledgement that, hey, I still exist, I'm still alive. I run into it and I don't really understand because, maybe I did something. But I have these relationships with people and I thought we were pretty good friends, but they don't talk to me anymore. They just, it's like I don't exist. And yet they talk to all of our mutual friends. And I feel like, what can you do about that? I'm not going to throw a fit. I'm a grown adult, It's hard. It's hard sometimes. Because you get put into these situations that are just like, well, what are you supposed to do? All your friends get invited to a Christmas party, for example, and you don't get invited. And then it puts your friends in a situation like, well, should we invite him or was he not invited for a reason? And nobody really knows. And I guess it doesn't really matter. It is what it is. The older we get, I think the less friends we have. I think a lot of our friends turn into acquaintances. Just because life gets busy, honestly. You have people who move away, you have people who start careers. I got a lot of friends that are in med school. And I think about that, I'm like, man, they're going to be doctors in just a couple years. Or they're already doing residencies. I'm like, good for them. That's awesome. It's not where I'm at with my life, I chose a different path, and it took me where it took me. I think what's most important is the fact that we remember that even if we don't talk, we're still friends. And you can try your best to be decent, and you can try your best to do what you can to help out. We may not talk every day, we may not see each other every day, we may not see each other for months. That we're not and create these relationships, and you get met with just basically like, what are you doing? Hey, you still Snapchat me. But it's so empty, It's superficial. I think the hardest part for me is because I look at how I am as a friend and how I try to be as a friend. And, I want to be there for people. If you need help moving, call me. If I'm not available, I will do what I can to be there. I'm always available for everybody, it seems like. And it's just my personality. I'm pretty shy, but if I'm your friend, then I'm right there and I'm willing to talk to you. I'm willing to, listen to what you have to say, because that's the kind of friend that I want. Unfortunately, that's not, it's not how it works. You don't get the reciprocation just because you do something. But anyway, in the past, I think that I would be kind of upset at the fact that I had to cut someone off because they were being disrespectful, or, hey, I might have liked them. Maybe I wanted to sleep with them. Maybe I was trying to get somewhere with them. And so I'd stick around and take abuse and whatever, and I don't need to do that anymore, and it felt nice. One thing that I think is important is that you let people in your life know that you care about them. Because I think, honestly, life is pretty fragile. There was a funeral this week that I didn't attend. It was for someone that I was close to. Her brother died earlier this year from a drug overdose, and that was a little bit too much, I guess, for her, and we hadn't talked about it a lot. I'd reached out kind of, to say I'm sorry, but I hadn't really checked in, and she ended up taking her own life, and it was a difficult situation for her family. I mean, her parents lost 2 kids in about 6 months. You're not ever, in my opinion, you should never outlive your kids. That's the worst thing that could happen, I think. And I didn't know what to do or how to cope with that or what to say. Her mom and dad invited me out to like a dinner the Saturday before the funeral, just to talk to me. They'd been really good people to me, and it was good talking to them, and I honestly didn't know what to say. What can you say? The loss of life, I think, is something that is so hard to comprehend, because whatever your belief system is, there's so much unknown to it. And, whether or not you believe in God or you believe in an afterlife, it feels good to believe in something. And I think that's why people do it, for the most part. I think it's good to have hope that there's something after life, whether it's heaven or reincarnation or something like that. Because physical death seems so permanent and just awful. You're put into the ground and that's it. Friend of mine who listens to the podcast, Adrian, he lost his grandfather this week. And he wrote a very touching piece on Facebook about it. And my heart, goes out to him, because I've had a few friends die, but I haven't had a lot of family die. And so I don't really know how it feels exactly, My grandmother passed away a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago almost. My mom's mom. And it was surreal to me because, I didn't have that much interaction with her growing up. My sisters had more interaction, but by the time I was old enough to make sense of it, she was already old and suffering from dementia, So I didn't have these memories of my grandmother like my sisters did, my parents did. My grandpa's still alive, and I don't have a great relationship with him. Yeah. And it's not like it's bad. I just don't have a relationship with him really. He's hard of hearing. He stays in most of the time, and part of that's on me. That I could do a whole bunch more to go and see him, go and visit, and I think that I need to. Because, he is my grandpa. And it's kind of hard for me because I'm adopted, So it's not like I have this blood connection to my relatives, and so sometimes I feel like, well, I kind of feel left out about it. I know that that's not the intention, but I kind of feel like an outsider. For example, my aunt, she's always buying things for my sisters and for their kids and all these different things, and I don't have interaction with my aunt, and it's like, well, okay, I guess. You treat your nieces and nephews all equal? Maybe, maybe not. As an uncle, I would. I don't ever single out any of my nieces or nephews. I don't have favorites. I don't buy things for select people in my family. I have a hard time with gifts and stuff because I have 24 nieces and nephews, okay? I go broke trying to keep up with birthdays and Christmas and all that. But attention-wise and everything like that, I do my best. I don't know what I think about death, and I don't know how it's going to hit me if I lose my parents. Over the past few years, I've gotten really close with my parents, and I owe my parents everything. So I don't know how I would react if they were to die. I got a buddy that I grew up with. His mom died recently, and I went to the funeral, and I was like, I can't imagine, man. You're about to get married. What are you gonna do? It's gonna be weird. Your mom has been there and seen everything for you, and then she's not there. I don't know what I would do. I mean, I went to South Carolina for a year and didn't see my mom and dad, and it was stressing me out. I saw my mom, I guess, halfway through, about 6 months into living in South Carolina. I went to Tennessee and saw her visiting my sister. But it was hard. And that was even being able to talk to him on the phone. I think as we get older, we have our own families eventually, and that kind of replaces it a little bit, but still nothing like having a parent. I thought I would read this. Adrian had posted this. I thought it was really pretty great. He says, I lost the greatest man I have ever known today. The man who helped raise me. The man who was at every single game and event. The man who never gave up believing in me when it seemed like I would always screw up. The man who took me to school every single day, even when the school was across town. The man who taught me how to fish and camp. The man who made me love Johnny Cash, the Carpenters, John Denver, and big bands. The man who had every tool to fix whatever I needed. The man that showed me you could be as stubborn as a coal miner, but still have the tolerance and empathy of a saint. Without you, I would not be any amount of the man I am today. I love you, Grandpa. I'm so glad you're not in pain anymore, but goddamn, I miss you so much. Rest in peace, Eddie Vigil. I owe you everything. I think that's great. And I've known Adrian since 8th grade. And we have kind of an interesting past, I guess. It's hard to believe it at the time, but, seeing him now, if you knew him now, but me and my other friend used to bully him back in elementary school, and you look back and you're like, man, that's kind of shitty, bad, that's bad, you shouldn't have bullied anybody, but it was fun to pick on him because he gave it right back, he's always been kind of a weird guy. And, it was interesting that people had referred to him as, like, the group asshole. Like, that was somehow his role. And I always thought that was kind of dumb. Because it's like, anybody that really knows him knows that he's like that. But why is that? A big part of it is because he speaks his mind. He says whatever is on his mind. He's very honest. And that comes across pretty awful sometimes, I guess. If you're not, if he catches you off guard. And I've always, we've had our share of issues, him and I. And mostly, that's coming from my end. And it was, I don't know. I think it took some growing up for me. But he's honestly one of the most genuine people that I've ever met. He is a very good friend. And so I understand, like, when he says these things about his grandpa, that his grandpa must have been a great man to raise him like that and to be a really decent person. And so, like I said earlier, my thoughts and prayers go out to him and to his family. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. I didn't have a whole bunch that I wanted to talk about, but I saw this picture, and it was so hard to me. It was like one of those ones, it has 4 people in it, and it's like, one of these has to have never existed. And it was Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Drake, and Kanye West. For some people, this would be easy because they're like, oh, Kanye, no doubt, get him out of here. I can't say that because I love Kanye West. I love his music. He's a genius. He's a modern day Renaissance man. So I can't say that. But then I examine it and I'm like, well, Kendrick Lamar, his rap is just incredible. The words that he has to say, I sit there and it's like, that's really pretty conscious rapping that's going on right now. And he speaks in such a different way that it just kind of hits you. Then I thought about it some more. I'm like, man, J. Cole, platinum with no features, 2014 Forest Hills or whatever. That album was great. And he says some things that I'm just like, that is on a whole different level of just amazing. So I don't know if I can have him out of there. And I'm like, okay, well, what about Drake? And I'm like, oh man. Thank Me Later was one of my favorite albums, and then Take Care came out, and I was like, how can you top that? Well, Take Care. And his music just, he gets a lot of flack. He takes a lot on the chin about his whining or whatever you want to call it. But I was like, I feel what he's saying on such a deep level. And I love his music. Not, and the only reason I would have to put him out is because the stuff that he's done recently, I just haven't connected to as much. It hasn't been as deep for me. It's still good music. I still enjoy every Drake song that comes out, and listening to the albums, and More Life was good, but I can't take any of the other three off. No matter how crazy and wild Kanye is, no matter how much you hate Kardashians or whatever. I mean, J. Cole has been putting out quality music for a long time. Kendrick has been putting out music for a long time. And it kills me when I meet people and you talk to them about Drake, and the only things that they can talk about are like One Dance, songs like The Motto, YOLO, And it's like there are so many songs that he has done, and you listen to them and it really speaks to you. It's deep. The people that hate Kanye and they use the body of work that they know, and it's like, he produces music. He produced some of the greatest beats, and the stories of him, like him and Jamie Foxx, like meeting Jamie Foxx and rapping and getting Jamie Foxx on his songs, and it's like, that's amazing. This was a young kid who went and got what he wanted. Genius. It's hard for me, man, because I love all four of them. And what's crazy is, like, if you look at my top 10, okay, this is not in any order. I don't like when people are like, these are the top 10 rappers of all time, because I don't think that any one list is right. I think everybody has their own top 10, like, people that just, it hits for them. So those four are on my top 10. And then you add in people like Childish Gambino, Fabulous. I have my reasons for Fabulous. Young Jeezy. A lot of people are like, oh, why would you put him on the list? But you gotta have him on the list. What is that? That's like 7. I don't even know if top 10 wise. I love people like A Tribe Called Quest. They were just people that I grew up with that kind of defined who I was almost. It was the Atlanta rap scene. It was people like T.I. and Young Jeezy and Ludacris, and I wanted to be from Atlanta so bad when I was in middle school, or end of middle school, early high school. I was like the snowman, and I don't think it took me a long time to realize what I was listening to, like what was Snow, what was Mr. 17.5, a lot of these things. And it's funny because I just emulated this idea of Atlanta, and I loved it. Fabulous has always been one of my favorites. His put out some really like gangster music right in the beginning. His first album, I think, came out on September 11th, 2001. Towers Go Down. He's from Brooklyn. He still managed to sell records, but what a tragedy. What a day to put a record out. My favorite stuff from Fabulous, though, are these albums he has called the Soul Tapes. There's 3 of them. And it just combines the types of beats that I love, and then his punchlines. Childish Gambino, for me, is tough because I love his old raps, because lyrically I think he's just on another planet. And so his new album was hard for me because it was so different. It was really like gospel. Had a gospel feel to it, and I was like, I can vibe to this, but it's not my favorite. But I think that's how all of our artists are. I think all of our artists put out something that we're like, well, I don't know about that. You know, good that you put out the music, but I don't know if I like this as much as your other stuff. And that's fine. But the fact is, everybody's going to be a little bit different and a little bit progressive. And it's kind of hard. For example, Linkin Park. Rest in peace, Chester. Their new stuff, it just hurt my soul. But that's because I grew up on 2 albums, Hybrid Theory and Meteora. And I just loved those albums so much. During my little emo phase, I guess. Those were albums that I just gravitated to and I listened to over and over again. And so when they put out their new stuff, I'm like, this is so different. I don't know if I like it. Bands like Paramore, they hadn't put out music in forever, and then they put out this new album, like this new music, and I was like, what is this? This is not the Paramore that I remember. This is not the Paramore I like. But it's like all they're doing is adjusting to the times. And they're adjusting to where they're at as a band. Where they're at with their growth. And so you can't really fault bands for doing that. Because I think we remember them at their best times when it was the best for us. Another group like that, Breathe Carolina. I really liked their first album, and subsequent albums started getting a little more electronic, and I was like, okay, I can kind of dig it. And then recently they put out music and it's essentially all electronic. There's no screaming, there's no them singing. And I was like, what is this? But I like it. It's just different. It's not Breathe Carolina that I remember. But that's the beauty of music, is that it evolves and it changes all the time, but it doesn't go away. I can still pull up It's Not Classy, It's Classic, that first album, and I can listen to those songs and hear the old school screaming and everything, and I love it. And I don't complain about it. Music to me is the single most beautiful thing in this world, because it's so expressive. It does what words can't do. The words in music are put far more eloquently than we could ever imagine speaking. This is a real sore spot with me. I hate when people talk bad about music, a type of music. Like, your music sucks. That's an opinion. You can have that opinion, but why would you have that opinion? Leave it alone. Just honestly, leave it alone. There's so much good music out there. I mean, I was looking at my Spotify the other day, and I listened to This Wildlife. It's like indie, and I love it. It's my favorite band, and I listen to them every single day. I listen to 2 albums every day at work. And then I'm like, I like rap. I listen to lyrical stuff. I listen to trap music. You know, I listen to country music. I have this country playlist that I listen to, and it just makes me feel good. It makes me happy. I listen to electronic music. Some people are so against it, and whatever, to each their own. But it just feeling it in your chest and like in your whole body, that pounding beat and just these drops and everything, it's electrifying. And so I understand the draw that some people have and why it's their favorite music. For me, if I had to choose, I still think that R&B is my favorite type of music. And that might be because I'm a little bit sappy. I'm a bit of a romantic. But that's kind of how I like it. You know, I like these artists. I like Usher, and I like Mario and Tank. Some of these older guys, Marcus Houston. And that's just kind of where I'm at. My fallback, my go-to will always be R&B. But I don't think to say that someone's music is bad, their choice in music is bad. It's not about like what you think. Everybody's choice in music is dependent on something. It's everybody listens to something because of how it makes them feel. So in essence, you're telling someone that their feelings don't matter. They're not important because of your bias. So for me, I can't be around people who are negative about different music. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to listen to it. But to say that one genre is awful music, you know, to me, there are no absolutes in this world. That is the only thing absolute, is that there are no absolutes in this world. And that kind of leads me into my final thought for the podcast. I'm going to cut this one a bit short. But I've been thinking recently, I have a quote tattooed on my body. And it says, and it's actually a Fabulous lyric, interestingly enough. That's how much I enjoy Fabulous's music. I have his lyrics tattooed on me. It says, always forgive, never forget. Learn from mistakes, but never regret. And I thought about it, and I'm like, is that really true? Do I live that? And I'm like, I have been trying to live that for the longest time. And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I do have regrets. And that's okay. Because it's almost like we're told and conditioned that we're supposed to always move forward, that we never look back, and you never look into the past. And I tend to disagree now. I think for the longest time I was like, yes, 100% yes. You don't look back. But it's like, look, your past defined you. But it doesn't have to be absolute. That's the beauty of it. You are able to turn around and go back a little bit. I mean, you can't change, obviously you can't change the past, but you can change things about it. I liken it unto a hike. You're hiking with your friends. You come to a fork in the road, and you take the one fork, and about 2 miles later you realize it's the wrong fork. And you're confident in your ability to scout the mountain. You're like, I will make it to where our destination is, okay? And you start walking, and it's steep, and there's pricker bushes everywhere, and you're hot, and you get stabbed, and you're bleeding. But hey, you finally make it to the edge of the lake that you were trying to get to. Is that any better than turning around, going back to the fork, and taking the other fork? It may not take you any longer because you know the way once you get back to where your base is. You know the way. There's nothing more noble about pushing through. Some might argue that there is, that you put your head down and you got through it, and maybe you're better off for it. But maybe you're just bloody and bruised and exhausted when you get to where you're supposed to be. I don't think that there's any shame in having regrets, having things that you want to have changed, things that you wish you had done differently. I don't think that there's any problem with that. I think the problem comes when we let that take over our lives and we start to wonder all the time, and you start to sit and think, Harry Potter reference, that mirror of Erised. You see in it what you want to see. And he said that men waste their lives looking in it. I think that you can't sit and think about what could be if you're not going to make action. It would be like stopping on the trail and saying, well, we really should go back to the fork. Because I don't want to go forward. I don't want to go down this ravine. I don't want to have to hike back up that side of the canyon. I don't want to do this. And then just sitting there and thinking, well, we really should go back to the fork. Ultimately, we have choices in our lives all the time. And hindsight is 2020. We don't know how good our choice was until well after it's passed. And sometimes we'll never know how good our choice was. And it's like, maybe dating that girl wasn't a good idea and I dodged a bullet. But maybe it would have been the greatest thing ever. You know? Maybe taking this job would have been great and I would have advanced through it and enjoyed it. But maybe I would have hated it and it would have led to heart disease and early death. You know, something dramatic, but it's like, we don't really know our path. But it doesn't mean that we should limit ourselves to only looking forward and only looking for the new solution. Sometimes all it takes is revisiting an old solution and tweaking it. Like I said in the last podcast, I feel like I'm going through this like late 20s crisis, like a life crisis, and it's frustrating to me because I can't talk to people about it the way that I want to because I hear the exact same things out of everybody's mouth. And I know it already. You know, I know what they're going to say. And so I'm like, look, I don't care to hear it anymore because I know what you're going to say. Ultimately, it comes down to being happy and what I want to do to be happy and how I'm going to get there. And I don't think that everybody knows what that is, what that one thing is, or if there is one thing that makes you happy. And so for me, there's going to have to be a good deal of soul searching that happens, I think, and whether that's sooner or later, I guess we'll find out. But I don't think you should ever let anybody tell you that you can't go back. And that the past is only in the past. On that note, hopefully everyone has a great weekend. Coming to the end of the month. For my business, we're in the fourth quarter right now. And today was the last day of the first month of the last quarter. So it's coming up. And this year is just, we're almost in August. August, November, okay, hold on. August, September, October, November, December. That's 4 months. I have 4 months to figure out what I want to do, where I want to go. And I think it'll be an interesting 4 months. But hopefully everyone has a good weekend. And thanks for tuning in.